today's show, I go behind the life of Ben Rowley. Ben is an avid Stoke City fan and, like myself, a podcaster, hosting the brilliant YYY Files, where he invites supporters to come onto his show and share their love and memories of Stoke City. It's a great concept and I urge everyone to go and check it out. Ever since he can remember, Ben has suffered with dysphemia, also known as a stammer. It crushed his confidence and made his teenage years very difficult. But Ben was brave enough to fight his stammer and sought professional help to keep it under control. He wrote an incredibly moving and honest blog in 2018 and now calls himself a recovering stammerer. I'm delighted he's on the show today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Behind the Life of Ben Rowley. Ben, welcome to the show. It's great that you've been able to come on after having me as a guest on your show last week. How are you doing?
I'm all right, mate. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really good. Weird time for everybody, as I say on some of my podcasts myself. But I'm doing all right. I've got plenty to keep me busy, despite it not being the usual things that keep me busy. Guess you've just got to adapt. But no, I'm doing okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Ben. I say, as we've been speaking over the last few weeks quite a lot. So, as you know, the concept behind the life, it's where I interview interesting people who've had interesting lives. And we're here today really to talk through your highs, your lows, and everything in between. And we got speaking about something which has had a major part in your life is your stammer, which you have touched on, with a blog that you did back in 2018, which I mentioned before. And it's something that you really wanted to come on to talk about more and to share your story about it. But before we start with that, Ben, let's just rewind. Just tell us a bit about yourself, where you were born.
Okay, so my name's Ben. Hello, everyone. I'm from Stoke-on-Trent, born and bred. My mum's half of the family's from Oxford. Dad's half born in Stoke. Very, very lucky that they managed to meet at some point in their lives. And then, I don't know, since then, it's been a weird life, really. I'm really pleased to be on the show because you've had some really remarkable people on this podcast with really remarkable stories, and I don't class myself as being in that category at all. However, like there's a couple of things I think I'm really passionate to talk about. And you touched on it. One of those has been a stammer. It's possibly been one of the few constants that I've ever had in my life, I guess.
Well, a stammer, a stutter, dysphemia, which is the medical term that they call it. I was surprised when I was reading some of the numbers earlier on. So 8% of children who have a stammer, at one point during their childhood will have some sort of stammer, and around 3% of adults will have it as a lifelong condition. For yourself, when did you first show signs of having a stammer?
For me personally, my memory's not the best, but it is as long as I can remember, genuinely. One of my earliest memories being outside the home was actually in NHS speech therapy, and I'd just be sat there trying to get my words out. So I think it's worth me sort of clarifying what my stammer is/was. So there's sort of different types of stammering. Some people repeat their words, so they can't stop saying the same word over and over again. Some people elongate their sounds, particularly at the start of the sentence. For me, it's more of a blocking. So a lot of people don't even know that I started talking, if that makes sense. The sensation, if I'm trying to describe it, is if you can imagine jumping into an ice bath and your lungs completely close, even though you're trying to draw in air and you want to push out that air and scream, don't you? And you can't. The air is just completely taken away from you. That's what it's like for me every time I open my mouth, pretty much. Even though it doesn't sound like it now, it's something that you can control over time. There's no cure for it particularly, that, like, as far as I'm aware, and as far as my see, there you go. I'm like, there's nothing that people can really do about it pharmaceutically, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's ways of controlling it, and for many people, you said like 8% of children have it, and then lots of people have it going throughout their adult life. One of the early stages for that is speech therapy in this country through the NHS, which for some people absolutely works. It never did for me, for a number of reasons, I think. Partially because my self-confidence at that point was so low. At school, like anything, if you're different in any way, shape, or form, you're bullied for it. And as you can imagine, speaking as a child is extremely common, especially when you're trying to learn to speak, or if you're answering things in class, or if you're trying to make friends for the first time. It can completely turn the other way, and you do exactly the opposite of that. As you said, I'm sort of a recovering stammerer. I'm much better than I was. And one of the reasons I think for that is because you mentioned how a lot of children have it 8% and then it's less in adults. Some people do grow out of it, but some people, they don't necessarily lose it. They know how to hide it. So as far as I'm aware, there's two main types of stammering. There's overt stammering, where you can see or hear someone stammering. You can see the repetition. You can hear the elongation. You can literally see that someone's trying to say something, but they can't. They're blocked. Of course, in many situations, that's quite embarrassing. But covert stammering is where the stammerer is to know that they are to stammer in that scenario, maybe because they've said that phrase before, or they know the situation that they're in. And they will choose to maybe interchange their vocabulary. So stammers tend to trip over very harsh sounds like B's or P's, for example. So they might ignore those words. For some people, it's easier to have a run-up. So, for example, it's very difficult for me to say my name, Ben Rowley. It took me a lot for me to do that, to really concentrate. But it's much easier for me to say my name is Ben Rowley, because you've got that run-up. You've almost got the momentum taking you into your phrase. But to be honest, for most people, covert stammering is not speaking at all. And it's really, really dreadful, because you can miss out on so many situations in your life. Like asking for help, for example, I missed out on that as a kid sometimes, whether that was just at school or whether that was help because I was worried about something. You miss out on socializing with people, especially new people, because you're worried about what they might think in the first place. I was worried about taking a part-time job at the time, because I think that, people wouldn't want to take me on knowing that I've got this. I guess it's not an issue, but when it's in your own head, you are worried about it. Life experiences. I remember quite vividly this time at school. I was only, say, 10, 11 or so. And there was this school trip to like this holiday camp. I guess, like, these outdoor activity type things. Lots of schools do them. And I was one of 5 people not to go in the entire school. And partially that was because, I'd be mixing with my friends, people from school who I wasn't particularly in friendships with. I'd be speaking to them on a more regular basis, and then new people that you meet there as well. And it was just a very, very scary thing to meet new people. So I chose not to go. I made my excuses. I said I was unwell. I said I just didn't want to go. Like, there plenty of reasons, but I missed out on loads and loads of opportunities like that. I know I've just rambled on for a good while, and you might think, what the hell is he talking about? He's speaking fine. But compared to now, when I was probably 11, 12, I couldn't string a sentence together. And I'm sure that plenty of people have seen people stammer before, but those who have seen the most severe cases, they know it can be so crippling.
Yeah. You said before that you cannot really remember when you first developed this stammer. Is that something that your parents remember when you were a toddler? That, I've got a 6-year-old boy now who I can have a good conversation with. Can your parents recall there's an issue? Because then it is a neurological condition. So,
Mm.
what was there a stage of your parents ever spoken to you about it, saying, yeah, I remember when you were 4 or 5 and you had trouble speaking?
I'll be honest, it's not really a conversation I've ever had with them.
Yeah.
Like it's a tough conversation to have, I think. And unfortunately now it's not really one that, unless I'm curious, I think I need to have. As daft as that sound, they must have been aware. They must have known growing up, whether it was through hearing me speak themselves, or whether it was through school reports or other people noticing, whatever else have you. They wouldn't have taken me to the NHS speech therapy if that wasn't the case. They were certainly aware of it, and they would have been pretty much from when I was starting talking. You're right. It's a neurological issue. It's strange that I think the reason why there's no medical cure, there's no remedy, is because there's nothing actually really. There's nothing physically wrong with you, particularly. There's physical things you can do to make it better. But yeah, it's a neurological condition. It's a bit like hiccups, I think. Like that's like a comparison I can draw. It's just your body malfunctioning in some way.
Well, yeah, you touched on covert stammering before, and
Mm.
that's almost a stammerer's worst nightmare. Correct me if I'm wrong. Where a stammerer is worried about their stammer.
And unfortunately, that's the vicious circle of a stammerer. Like a stammerer. I, I can only speak from my experience, but I'm sure it's the case for many. In my experience, a stammerer will likely stammer in a situation where they think they will stammer, and you can see how that situation is such a vicious circle. So, and it's of times of perhaps where the breathing is uneasy too. So I'm thinking particularly after you've done heavy exercise and you're out of breath, a stammerer is possibly more likely to stammer. Perhaps if you're nervous about something, say you're about to go on stage for some reason, and a stammerer is possibly more likely to be stammering them because they're nervous. In a situation like this, I'm probably more likely to stammer than I would in everyday life. And it's because as you're doing that in your head, you're going through this scenario of not feeling on the same class as other people because of your inability to speak. I think it's very British that a lot of people dislike human interaction, like where you can go to a cashier and have someone scan your shopping for you. Most people go to the scan your shop or the self-checkout because you don't have to deal with a human being. Imagine rather disliking a human interaction. Imagine dreading it, literally being terrified of it. So why might that be? It's because I might think I'm being foolish. I'm worried about being mocked. It has happened. I have been mocked for it as I say, like any sort of different child in school, we bullied for it. You're worried that, okay, people might not react straight away, but people are confused. But I think more importantly, you're worried that you're just wasting someone's time. Like that's the thing. And I know how irrational that can sound, but again, it's a mental health thing. Like you're genuinely worried that you're taking up someone's precious time, and it's it's such a bizarre scenario. And by thinking through all of this in your head and wanting to get it perfect, more than often than not, you get it wrong.
Ben, and I completely understand. And you said before about the different types of guests I've had on the show, and you don't think your story is as important. What it is, because having a stammer, unfortunately, it still has that massive stigmatism out there, especially when you're younger, you're at school, you become self-aware, you become self-conscious. And I think it is a story where I touched on before, 8%. I couldn't believe those facts. I don't know if you knew them. 8% of toddlers growing up will suffer some type of stammer, and that's a huge amount. And can you remember when? Obviously, I mentioned that's a question before about your parents, about when you were a toddler. But can you remember when you were first self-conscious? And it sounds a really bad thing to say when you thought, hang on, I'm different to my friends here on the playground.
It's quite odd because I think in hindsight, every single person on this planet, I'd agree, has some degree of a stammer. I don't think there's anyone that hasn't tripped over their words before. Yeah. I think the difference between a stammerer and a non-stammerer is that you're almost notorious for it. You're more aware of it. Like, I'm sure there's been loads of people who've been stood on a stage and literally nothing can come out of their mouth, and they just think that that's just the natural thing of what happens when you're nervous. Unfortunately, that hits harder for some people, and that's when they're branded with a stammer. So in answer to the question, it took me a while to realize that other people didn't feel like this. Do I remember a time? No. I did wonder why other people weren't going to speech therapy when I was younger, and it was just me. I did know some people, as you say, 8% of toddlers do have a speech impediment, and a lot of those do something about it. I remember there were several kids in my school that went and did these programs. What level their severity was, I'm unsure, but it must have been pretty bad for them to feel like they need to fix it. So it's not a clear-cut crystal question, I guess. How, like, that, to some degree, I'm not come to terms with it completely now, because, like I say, I think everybody does struggle with it at times, and there's no threshold. There's not like 50% of the time you speak or words come out of your mouth, you fall over them, you've got a stammer. There's no threshold. Was I worried that I was different? Yeah, as far pretty much back as I can remember. There's not a time where I thought that my speaking anyway wasn't different to anybody else's. Again, my memory doesn't go back a long way, considering that I'm only 24. That's quite embarrassing. But yeah, like it's literally been since I can remember. As I say, one of my first memories was in that speech therapy room and just trying to beat it. And I tried so hard to get rid of it. And it's not something that just goes away.
So how old were you when you were referred to the NHS for speech therapy?
Sort of infant school age, so probably 6-7 years old. Young, like I didn't have a big vocabulary then. And unfortunately, I don't recall everything that they did. I do remember, or I seem to remember anyway, that it didn't work particularly because I think a lot of their techniques, from what I can remember, was rather than overt stammering, incorporate covert stammering into your life. So, for example, interchange your words. If there's something that you can't say, swap it out for something else. And that's fine. If you're happy with that, that's fine. But like for me, I was never happy with that. And I would never remember to do that. You know, I'd like to think I was a decent child at school. So I always tried hard. I wanted to learn new things and ask questions and get involved. And sometimes you just can't get around that. For example, saying your own name, unless every time you act strange in public. And I was very aware of that. Even sometimes covert stammering, still is weird. If every time you introduce yourself, you need a verbal run-up, that's still very, very strange indeed.
But that's sorry, Ben. That's a very common issue with people with a stammer. That one of the main issues that most stammers, suffer from, is being able to say their own name.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And it is, and it must be sometimes. Again, I refer back to education or speaking to friends or even families, parents, when they've asked for your name and you've sort of started to say it out loud, that they might be thinking, does he really know his name? Is his name Ben?
Yeah. I've had it before, so I'm sure we'll talk about Stoke City later.
Yeah.
But I've been down at the I've been down to the ground loads of times, and you get searched. And of course, every time you go down to the ground to get searched, they ask you how old you are. Particularly me, because even though I am 24, I don't look it. I still look about 18. So every time they ask, "How old are you?" and I'm 24. Now think back to when I was 22. That's very hard. That's very. There's two very hard T sounds. I like when you're asked that, like rabbit in the headlights. You've not got time to think of a covert stammer. You just block. You try and say 22, and you block, and it like you know you screwed up, and that confidence, like the same would give you a name. You walk into a doctor's surgery and they ask for your name. What are you supposed to do? You can't say, "Oh, I can't remember. Let me think about that." You're right, because it's just as daft. And like something I might talk about later with this is it's all to do with confidence.
Yeah.
And every time you stammer, your confidence takes a blow. And you think about how many times you speak in a day, that confidence just gets hit every time. It's not necessarily a big confidence blow. Some people are most people, in fact, are very, very understanding of stammerers. And I think it's growing as it is with every disability or everything like that going through the world these days. People are understanding a lot more about what people are going through. But even then, like you still feel rubbish about it, the same way that you would if you'd screwed up at something you're really passionate about. Unfortunately, with speaking, it happens a lot, and there's no way around it sometimes.
So on a almost on a friend basis, when you were growing up and you were 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, were you socially having a good group of friends, or we almost quite isolated in a way? Because unfortunately, kids at that age, and we've all been there.
Yeah.
There is picking and there's bullying going on. It's like, well, that person's different, or that person dresses like that. I'm not going to be friends with that person. Did you ever go for anything like that because of your stammer?
I've got to be honest. I was very lucky, I think, as a kid, that I made very good friends very early.
Okay,
and I was able to stick with them throughout my school life. I think if it wasn't for them and my family, I would have really, really struggled. I did make friends later into, so you're less aware or you're less worried about stammering when you're like 5-6 years old, the same way that you're not worried about a lot of things when you're 5-6 years old. Like you're carefree, it just happens. And luckily, if you meet friends at that age, some of them you develop friends for life. During probably the years of like 7 to about 14, I struggled to make new friends unless they were mutual. That was also probably the time where I was probably bullied the most. I'd like to think at school I was an in-betweener. I wasn't exactly the cool kid, but I wasn't exactly isolated, I would call it. I always very, very fortunately had people to go to. And this is where I sort of sympathize with a lot of people, because some of them really have nowhere to go. And as a kid, I've probably been known to have upset somebody like terribly. And I think about that now, and I think like some of these people have nobody to go to. Like I used to be so upset at school sometimes about a stammer, but I'd have people to go to afterwards. Some people have nothing.
I was about to say, did that ever affect your almost like your temper in school? Did you ever get into fights because you were so frustrated?
I would avoid a lot of things, as a stammerer does. Like I say, covert stammering is probably that was my get out clause at the time. I would be a very quiet person in those years, especially with new people. I wouldn't put my hand up in class. I wouldn't put my hand up in class to answer a question. I wouldn't necessarily start a conversation. I find actually starting conversation very difficult now. I think a lot of people do because they're worried about what to start a conversation off with. For me, I've got to be able to start a conversation, but I've got to be able to start to say it as well. Like I've got to have the physical ability to be able to start the conversation. So that rules a few things out, which you absolutely shouldn't do, and things have changed these days.
Sorry, Ben. Did that affect your education? The grades you got at school?
Um, I must admit, as a child, I was relatively successful.
It's good.
Plenty of GCSEs. Went on to get A levels, for full A levels. I was always. I think my school reports were good. Um, in fact, I think in my, what is it when you're like 10, 11, is it your SATs? I think in my maths, I got 99 out of 100, which were like, what? So I'm very lucky that I pick up things very quickly. And I actually think it ties into stammering quite a lot. I think what a lot of stammerers have is an overactive brain, as in people who have an overactive brain, I tend to find can pick up things very quickly. You're able to interpret, absorb, and utilize anything you pick up very quickly. I think that's why, on the flip side, I've got a bad memory. I think the better you are at understanding something, the worse of a memory you have. That's definitely the case for me. But yeah, I was always able to pick stuff up quickly. But I think it's that same overactive mind that, as I think as a stammerer, I'm trying to think of the next thing to say before I finish the first thing I've said.
Yeah.
And that's how you trip over your words as well. I think that's the case for a lot of people who stammer, actually. Like I say, I know some people in my life, perhaps they wouldn't class themselves as stammerers, but I know people that do it on a occasional basis, and they tend to have the same sort of brain, a very overactive one. One that sort of keeps ticking in the background, can never stop thinking, and that's always been my way. So it's a double-edged sword, really. I guess I got fortunate that I was able to pick stuff up at school, and that gave me a lot of confidence.
Sorry, Ben. I think you
No,
touched on
no,
it
go on.
before that you had a great network of friends that you've known
Mm.
since being a toddler around you, as well as your family too. Has this affected your, looking back now on your teenage years? Has it or did it affect your mental health? Would you say?
Um, I probably wouldn't have classed it so at the time, but yes. I I was fortunate that you read some horrible stories about what kids are going through these days, panic attacks, suicidal thoughts, that all across the board, self harm. Luckily, I was never quite in that category. Certainly, would I go home and think about it? Yeah, all the time. Would I do what I could to make sure that that didn't happen in my life? Absolutely, because I saw it as an embarrassment. Rather, I didn't own it. That's something I never had. Like, I I never had the ownership of what I had. I always would say that it was a thing I was cursed with. So, and I always saw it as a thing that I was fighting. So I would do whatever I could to fight it, and to some degree, I still do that today. Like, I still see it as a thing that I have and I need to fight. But back then, I didn't see it as part of my personality. I seen it as something that was attacking my personality,
Yeah.
and I feel like it was something that was holding me back.
And I suppose always talking about getting lucky. Yes, you're only 24 years old, but you were going to school before social media really took off.
Oh
Your
God,
likes of your Instagram, your Snapchat, which really exasperate situations, and they are wonderful platforms, but they can be evil as well, and
yeah.
they can be trolled, and they can encourage bullying to your keyboard warriors. Have you come across anybody who's younger than you through? We'll talk about the McGuire program later on.
Hmm.
That has really suffered because of their stammer, because of being picked on, bullied at school.
I've seen stories, yeah, of somebody I know personally. I think I'm probably, at my worst, I'm probably one of the worst that I've seen have been affected by it that I know personally. Um, but I know some stories of people that have locked themselves away in rooms, not wanted to go to school, have self-harmed, have had suicidal thoughts, have kicked and screamed for their parents not to take them to school, all because they can't get their words out their mouth in the way that they want to. And when you think about it, it's so irrational from an outside point of view. It really is. Like, I'm sure some people that are listening to this and don't sympathize think, for goodness sake, it's only just like, no, like you're not able to get your words out of your mouth immediately, so be it. And I think some people really do take that for granted. Like I say, it's not necessarily those big hits of confidence that you take. They do happen, like if you're bullied for it, that can happen, but it's the tiny little hits. It's death by 1,000 cuts, stammering. It really is.
Yeah.
So I don't know anybody personally that has gone through it, but I've seen some absolutely terrible stories, and for those people, I feel very, very lucky and very privileged to be in the position that I am today, where I'm able to do something like this, because I certainly wouldn't be here had I not been through, I think, a number of confidence building experiences, like activities in my life. Some people haven't had the opportunity to have had that happen to them. I can't say that was the same for me. I've been very, very fortunate.
So you left college then, Ben. Did you go on to university after that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So you mentioned the McGuire program. Before that, so this was before university. I I was coming towards the end of school, and I knew what I wanted to do, and my parents knew what I wanted to do as well. And that was to go to university, as you say. I really wanted to be an architect. I don't know what it was, or if I'm going back even further, I wanted to be an inventor of some kind, some sort of like, mad scientist mastermind was always like in the back of my head. But eventually, towards the end of school, when you're made to think about these things, I settled on architect. And by that point, I knew I needed to go to university, and my parents knew that too. And they were worried as much as I was that I wouldn't go, because think about all the things you need to do to go to university. You need to often get yourself in there in the first place, and that's having the confidence to be able to put your application in my case, go for an interview at university, and then you've got to go and meet people and work in new work groups with new people and present things and push yourself out to employers for jobs. And in the state I was in, it just wasn't happening. It just really wasn't happening. So my parents made an intervention, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, that must have been quite challenging then, being 18 years old or 17, trying to plan for your future and being unsure whether or not to go to university because of your stammerer.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, like I talk about things that I never would have done had I been in the same position of being a stammerer before. I would have never gone to university. I would have never done a number of things in my life, but university would have been top of the list of things that I would have never done. And going to university has changed everything about me, as every little decision in life does. But no, I absolutely would not have gone, and it would have been horrendous. It would have been a huge waste of my life, I think.
So where did you go to university?
Loughborough University. I did product design engineering. So being good at maths and then wanting to invent and design things, that was the compromise that I came to. So product design engineering at Loughborough, which was absolutely fantastic.
So again, that is a huge thing. You're living away from home. You're living in halls, student halls. Suddenly, I remember now, I recall my first day back at Liverpool, John Moores University years ago, and I was just dumped there in halls of residence, and people come in and you don't know who they are, but of course, being able to easily interact into a conversation with them, and it's such a nervous moment. I can still think back to it now. For yourself, how was that? Can you remember your first day?
Oh yeah, so I remember moving in. And I must have moved into, I doubt any of them will be listening now, but if they are, I walked into the most macho hall I've ever met in my life. They're fantastic people. And I really love living with them in hindsight, but my God, I couldn't keep up with them. They were so outgoing and extroverted, and I was not, particularly at that time. For me, at that point, in terms of confidence, it was an all-time low, a serious low. So moving to university was incredibly tough, especially being away from, I talked about my friends and my family being that comfort. They'd gone. Like, they were out of the picture now. It was me on my own and me to rely on. And having to keep up with these extroverted people. In the end, I didn't. In the end, so you know how Freshers Week is.
Yes.
You go and party in the first couple of weeks to make new friends at university, and for a lot of people that's fantastic. For me, absolute worst nightmare. Very conveniently, I got a Freshers flu in like a couple of days into me being there. Did I perhaps exaggerate the symptoms and stay in my flat for a week so I didn't have to go out and socialise? Yeah. Did that mean that I possibly wasn't as close friends with the people I was in halls with and on my course that I could have been at that time? Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fair to say that when I eventually did develop the confidence at university to go and socialise properly, that the boat had almost gone. Not that they weren't open to it, not at all, but you know how it is when you sort of go into a group that have already known each other for a couple of months. It's difficult to then go and blend in, and then me not being at my all-time high confidence anyway, what do? You try your best, but it's not the same. So yeah, like university was tough in some regards. I said it was fantastic for me, and I still maintain that to this day. But yeah, tough first year at university.
Did that upset you?
Yeah, there was a point in university where, mixed with the fact that I thought I was on the wrong course, you know, I thought I'd moved away to university and I was doing the complete wrong thing. I was learning about things that I didn't want to learn about. And there was a point towards the Christmas of that first year where I thought I was going to quit. I thought that this just isn't the life for me. I thought I'd be learning about the things that I'd be really passionate about. I'm not. I thought I'd be making these wonderful new friends and meeting wonderful new people, and I'm not. And I thought, what's the point if it's costing me £9,000 a year and then some? You know, my student debt's over 50 grand now. I thought, like, what's the point? I might as well just cut my losses, sack it off, and stop. I carried on for whatever reason, but yeah, I very nearly quit, and part of that is because, you know, I just didn't develop myself properly at that time with these new people, partially because of the stammer.
So at what stage, let's touch on the McGuire program now. What stage did you turn to that? And if you can just give people a bit of a background to exactly what this McGuire program is and what it does.
Yeah, so I think it's important that I start off with that, really. So the McGuire program is a course, a professional course, a private course. It's not a charity as far as I'm aware. It's a funded program that you have to pay to do, run by stammerers themselves. You're not walking into an NHS clinic and you're speaking to a speech therapist who's read some notes on stammering. And don't get me wrong, like I say, some people have benefited massively from NHS speech therapy, and I highly recommend that if you've not tried that and you do suffer from a stammer, go ahead and do that, because it might genuinely solve your problem. It didn't for me. And what the McGuire program did was, because it's ran by stammerers themselves, it was invented by a guy called Dave McGuire. And he was a stammerer, and he developed two major techniques to improve your stammer. Like I say, there's no cure, but there's two major ways to improve it. One of them being this thing called costal breathing. So they teach about it a lot in opera singing and yoga and things like that. So it's about taking a big deep breath in, filling your lungs, your stomach, your back pushes out, and then you blow out very slowly as you can, and then you sort of stop breathing entirely, wait for about a minute or so, and then you bring the air in again. It's just to calm you down, I guess, and make sure that you're getting the right amount of air, or maximum amount of air, into your lungs. And that does help. It's a physical aid. It's like a walking stick for people with a limp, I guess.
Yeah.
But then this other technique that he developed, and I think this is the one that really resonated with me, and it's the one that I keep up with to this day, is this thing called non-avoidance.
Yeah.
And it's this thing where I think the NHS didn't work for me. And it was, rather than incorporate covert stammering into your life, which I was overly guilty of, it's no, thrust yourself in these overt stammering situations. So, for example, the activities that you would do there would include making a telephone call to, say, like a pizza company. And at first, it sounds really, really daft, like, making a phone call and ordering a pizza. Like, sounds dead easy. That's possibly a stammerer's worst nightmare. There's a there's a Twitter video that went around of a guy called Moid, and he's making a phone call for the first time. I don't know where you'll find it, but watch it. There's a documentary on ITV called School for Stammerers, and it's off there. Go and watch it, and just watch this person absolutely fold and curl into this ball of fear and anxiety over making a phone call. And I should also explain that this initial course that you go on, it's like a 3-day course. They hold like it's almost like a retreat in a hotel in this country and across the world. There's plenty of locations all across the UK. Mine was in Coventry, I think. And other techniques include you have to go out into the general public, and you have to walk to 100 members of the public and just speak to them. Maybe ask them what the time is. Maybe ask for directions. Maybe for 10 or 20 of those people, I was encouraged to walk up to them. Literally, the purpose of you going up to them is them going, "Hello, my name's Ben. I just wanted to let you know that I've got a stammer, but I'm on a course this week learning about it, and I'm trying to improve it." And that will be your interaction with that person. And then you'd see what they say, and you go away. And you do that 100 times. You would go into the middle of the town centre for me, that was Coventry City Centre, and you'd go and literally stand on a soapbox and speak to the public, like about anything. They don't give you a script. They just say, "You've got 5 minutes on that soapbox. Go and speak about something."
What did you do? Can you remember? What did you speak about?
I don't know. So you were asking when this was for me. I was about 15. Yeah. Which was they recommend that this course is for adults because it's a 3-day intensive course. It's 16 hours a day. Like it's for people who really have, in their opinion, no other option. Like it's an expensive course. It's an intense course. You have a membership for life. So if you need support going forward, you can go and do that. You have access to people over Skype. You can go and do refresher courses. But it's a massive financial commitment to the start. One that was backed by my parents at the time, and I'm forever grateful for. And I absolutely intend to repay them one day in like whatever way I can. But yeah, it's essentially it boils down to this really intense course of non-avoidance of your stammer and desensitizing yourself to these situations where you're anxious. And it does a number of things. You realize that these situations aren't so bad. Like, yes, you can stammer. People don't care. You almost have an epiphany of people don't actually care about stammering. If you do it, it's fine. Everybody does it to some degree, as I said at the start, but you're not aware of that when you're stammering, I think, from a young age, and perhaps going forward as well. But then because you're desensitized to these massive events, you're like, everyday life seems so much easier in comparison. Like, lots of people wouldn't speak on a soapbox in front of thousands of people in a town centre. So walking up to somebody in public or speaking to your friends or answering a question in a classroom is child's play in comparison, and you don't think twice about doing it. And it's just this remarkable way of building confidence. And at the end of the day, that's how you beat this vicious circle of stammering. Like, for a stammer to get worse, I think I said, you can have your confidence bashed every single day, and that's how it gets worse. Because you worry about stammering, you become more covert. You're not used to being in these situations of stammering in front of people. You've not got that practice, so you just eat yourself away, and it gets worse. On the flip side, if you would do these confidence building activities and attack it head on, you realize it's not so bad. It's eye-opening. It's incredible to realize just how much people don't worry about another person's insecurities. And that goes for anything in life. Some people are worried about the way they look, their accent, the way they portray themselves in public. For me, it's stammering. But for some people, it's their intelligence or where they come from or all sorts of things. Actually, it's just the McGuire program for me was this way of compacting these experiences of realizing just don't worry so much about what people think about you. And it compacted those experiences, which you might gain over decades, into 3 days. And it's just, you come out the other side and you're a different person. Or I was anyway.
Well, as well, Ben, though, you're only 15 years old. You know,
Yeah.
I'm 40 years old, and I would say I'm a bit of an extrovert, but I still wouldn't feel. You would never get me on top of a box in Liverpool City Centre talking at 40 years old unless I'd had a few beers. Basically.
Oh God, yeah.
It's probably singing Delilah by Tom Jones, which we'll come on to later on. But you're 15 years old.
Mm.
You're having to way go out your comfort zone, and for your confidence, that must have just done you the world of good.
Yeah, 100-fold. As I said, it's the best thing that I've ever done. And I think that thing, that phrase is overused. It's the greatest, most pivotal thing that's happened in my life. Whether it works for everybody, I don't know. Did it work for me? 100%. Am I ever so grateful for that experience in my life? Yes, 100%. I probably, to be honest, don't keep up with the things I was taught, or some of the things that I was taught in the McGuire program to this day. Should I do more work in my coastal breathing? Absolutely. Like, often I'll speak so much these days that I just run out of breath as I'm talking. Like, I can't stop myself. And again, it's this overactive brain just wanting to say stuff. But do I incorporate this do it, just get out there and do it attitude of speaking now? Yeah. Whereas pre-15-year-old me, I would be the world's worst covert stammerer and avoid every situation going, turning into this young adult where I'd do everything I could to beat it, essentially. I said before that I didn't own my stammer. From that point, I think I did. I think I realised it was a point where, you know what, I've got a stammer. Some people care about it. A lot of people don't. I don't care whether people care about it or not. I'm just going to go and do it. And I know that I want to reduce it as much as possible, regardless of whether I care about it or not. And to do that, I've got to thrust myself into these overt situations. And you'll notice that I've stammered and tripped over my words in this interview. But I don't care anymore. I really don't care. And it's a problem, I think, with every human being. And it's the greatest day when you wake up about something that you're insecure about, and the flip switches in your head, and you realize that these things are so meaningless, worrying about these insecurities in your life. And it's such a difficult thing to get over. And again, I sympathize so heavily because of the first 15 years of my life, with how difficult it can be to get over something that you're insecure about. But the day that changes, it's like being born again.
But again, Ben, that's mental strength as well, isn't it? It's, I've got a condition, but you know what? I'm not going to let it rule me. I'm mentally strong. And where's that come? Because it's clear that is in you. You come across as a very mentally strong person. Where has that come from? Has that just come from, again, your close network of friends and family and going on the McGuire program?
Yeah, absolutely. Those things were absolutely crucial. Like I mentioned my family and friends for reassurance on one count. My parents for putting me on the McGuire program in the first place. Yeah. I was terrified of going on there, terrified of actually having to face up to it. The first thing you do when you go on the McGuire program is they sit you in front of a stage in front of all the other people that were on the course. There's about, for me, I think there was about 100 other people that were learning on the course, and every person is assigned like a coach, as it were. So they call them graduates of the program. someone that's done that initial 3-day course. So there's about 250 people in this room total, and they sit you in front of this video camera and they record you, and they do like a 10-15 minute interview as you're doing now. And it was the worst experience of my life. And you know what was even worse? They play it back to you in front of you, and you realise quite how bad you are. I'm just thinking about it now. It's horrible watching it back. It really is. Like I can't watch it back today.
Have you still got it?
Yeah, it's in the loft now. I can't look at it back just because there's this person sat there who like he's trying his best to hide it. Like I said, I was probably the world's worst covert stammerer. You know, I'd utilize it in and you can see it, every trick in the book I was using, replacing words, dodging words, just not speaking at all, refusing to answer a question. And I'd watch that back and go, God, that wasn't something that happened when it was just a camera in front of me. That was all the time.
Yeah. So again, you said when you did that when you were 15 years old, and obviously you went off to university, Loughborough, when you were 18, and as you said before, that first year was probably your toughest year there. Was that more because you've been through the program, you learned your breathing techniques, etc.? Was that more of a self-conscious thing around your stammer that you were unable to interact with a lot of your roommates?
Breathing and stuff certainly helps. So for example, at university, like for those who haven't been and don't know, you're often, in most courses anyway, obliged to give a presentation for something you've done of some sort, whether it's group work, whether it's a piece of individual work you've done, like unless it's a very vocational course or sometimes when it is a theory-based course, like often you're required to present and project yourself in some way. Sometimes I'd sit there the night before and go, okay, it's probably worth doing some coastal breathing. But you asked before about like what gave me my confidence. I think I alluded to it before. There was a number of confidence building activities over my life that I'd done. So like the friendships that I'd built, like new friendships. Whenever I build a new friendship, it'd be so rewarding confidence-wise. I remember actually, when I was about, God, how old would I have been? 10, 11? I was in a school play. And for some reason, I actually think in hindsight, the teachers were extremely intelligent to realize this at some point. I was given a lead role. And I thought, like, like, come on, I've got a stammer. You're putting me in this situation where I'm a lead role in a play. Are you serious? And I actually said, I don't want to do this. I genuinely really don't want to do this. I'm terrified. But they must have known that this sort of stuff desensitizes you, because I went up and I did it. Amazing, don't get me wrong, I'm not an actor and I don't profess to be, and I was probably terrible, but like I actually did it, and that was enough. And like having done that, and like you do a couple of repeats with these plays and stuff, and it got better every time, and I felt so good for it. And there's other things I've done in my life as well, like securing job interviews. There was one, so like I've worked for one of the biggest companies in the world, and I secured that job over a telephone interview. Now, if you'd have asked me to have done a telephone interview 5 years prior to that, I'd have flat out refused. I'd have said, sorry, I can't do a telephone interview. I simply just can't go for this job. I'm sorry. Eventually I did it, and I was honest about my stammer actually in that interview. I said, look, like there's one thing you should know about me. If you hire me, it's not a problem. I don't see it as a problem, but I do have a stammer. And I think that honesty actually helped me get the job in the first place. It wasn't necessarily the hard skill that they were after, but I think that integrity helped me get the job. And then loads of other things, like I've done YouTube, doing podcasts like this helps. I've done live streams. I've been on Sky Sports and done stuff on there, and like it's just these things that, like, any opportunity I can to take now to batter down this emotional mental block of stammering being something you should hide, I try my best to thrust myself against that trend, and I try and put it out there, which is why I'm so grateful for something like this. Like, not only can I get my voice out there for people to hear, but it's about the thing that I'm actually really worried about. Still to this day, deep down, I worry about it. Of course I do.
Well, you know,
but
in 2018, November 2018, you pour everything that was in your head down on paper, and you wrote a blog called "The Confidence of Stammer Blow," which it's actually a really emotional read, and it's very honest as well. What made you write that then, Ben?
So, back in 2016, there was a time at uni where I was really, really struggling. And I think it was partially due to a stammer thing. I can't remember exactly at the time. I said my memory's not the best. But it was probably some sort of group presentation where I'd let the whole side down, and like, you know how university modules work. Like, if you screw up for one person, you screw up for a lot of people sometimes, and it means a lot. Like, university grades change people's lives at the end of the day for some people. So I was really self-conscious about it, and I saw that tweet I was on about, of that video of that ITV documentary, School for Stammers. And I saw that lad called Moyd do his interview over the phone, and I just tweeted about it. As daft as it sounds, I just tweeted about it, and I did like a couple of tweets, bit of a thread, sort of opening up and just having a bit of a rant about stammering, and basically a condensed version of this. I know I've been going on for quite a while about it, but I basically sort of summed that up in a couple of tweets. And people really resonate with it, and I thought it was really nice, and it made me feel much better about myself. And then there was a time in 2018, I'd graduated from university with decent grades that I was pleased with. And then I was trying to get myself a job, and initially I found it quite difficult to get, I was in a position where I wanted to take a job that I was really, really keen on. I didn't want to take anything going, because I knew that this would, I was willing to move away from home to get the job I wanted to any sort of corner of the country. And I made it through to the sort of last couple of rounds of interviews, sometimes down to the final two, and I'd miss out. And it was such a big confidence blow for me then. And I thought sometimes, being interviews, or sometimes there were presentations on a project for these interviews, and I thought, damn, my stammering probably let me down for that job. Whether that was true or not, I have no idea. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to write this blog post. I had a website because it was basically my portfolio for getting a job. I thought, you know what, I can let employers know that I've got a stammer, and on the flip side, I can make myself feel better if I just talk about it. It wasn't there for anyone particularly to read. It wasn't even there for something I wanted to get famous or and it certainly didn't. We're talking about probably 100 views that blog got, but I didn't care. It was just a journal piece, a public piece, because I've never written in a private journal that you keep in your drawer, because I just don't see the point. But by being in a blog post, it was public, and if someone stumbles across it, I'm not hiding it away. It's there for people to see, and I thought it was really, really important. And again, I got some half decent feedback of that from family and friends, and again, it sort of helped me to get a job. Really, I'm in that same job that I took a couple of months after, and again, that's probably for a time where I was feeling really low. It helped me in a way. Even now, despite being on the McGuire program and probably being 100-fold more confident than I was as a kid, you can still, confidence goes up and down all the time. So it was just a thing where I'd try and what's it called these days? Flattening the curve. I think it's a common phrase. I was trying to flatten the curve of my low confidence. And that's what I did that.
Well, what I'll do on my Instagram and my Twitter, I'll put all links to your blog, and we'll talk about your podcast in a second, into the McGuire program. Just wanted to touch on a point before we move on to your really to the next part of your life with your podcast that you're doing now. You mentioned before about people who are listening to this who might still have that stigmatism about people who have got a stammer, or actually, I was thinking about this earlier on, how to talk to people who've got a stammer, or allow people who've got a stammer talk to them.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it? So if you were going through a moment when you were much, much younger and you had a real stammer, did you find people were trying to almost finish your sentences for you? Or would you prefer someone to just say, look, just back off, just let me finish, take me time?
You know what? It's really, really difficult, because it's like anybody with any condition, like and any condition particularly that people can't see. Perhaps you walk up and somebody says that they've got cancer, like you just have no idea what to say. You don't know where to go. Oh, I'm sorry, and move on and don't talk about it. Some people want to say, oh, do you want to talk about it? Whatever, exactly right. And it's the same condition with a stammer. Like, I want to be clear, even though, like, as I say, as a kid, like, I was bullied for it at times. You know how kids are. Some people don't develop their maturity at a young age. It takes them many years after. Most people these days are absolutely fantastic. Like, some people just acknowledge that they're aware of what's going on, like not necessarily overtly, but sort of do that nod of the head or sort of the drop of the face to go, okay, I know what's going on here. Some people try to calm me down because they don't know what's going on. Some people remind me to breathe and things like that. My family will just sort of let it go, or perhaps at the end of a long conversation where I've stammered a lot, they'll say, look, we picked up on that. You need to sort of look at that again if it's something you want to work on. But to be honest, like, these days, for me, and I'm sure it's the case for most people deep down, people that are listening are just passengers, as much as, like, people want to help, people want to avoid, even ridicule. Like, at the end of the day, the battle isn't with the person that you're talking with. The battle's in your own head as a stammerer, right? And it's not because it's because if you're low on confidence as a stammerer, it's because you want that assurance, that sort of gratification, don't you? Like, lots of people look for that in their lives when they're low on confidence. They want the acceptance of another person. And that's a battle in your own head in itself. That's the root. It's that needing acceptance from other people. Yeah. And I think the true way to get over it is by not seeking acceptance from other people and getting that acceptance from yourself instead. In answer to your question, you said, what should people do? I think as long as your intentions are to work with them, so whether that is just acknowledging and then sort of moving on, not even bringing it up, whether it's laughing about it in a, like, laughing with you, not at you way, as long as it's not putting someone down, as long as it's not intentionally putting someone down, you're probably doing the right thing. Like, it's very hard to know. Like, in certain situations, I prefer if some people just let me carry on. In some situations, I prefer it if people finish my sentence for me if they know I'm struggling. Some people, like, I'd rather them just, like, say, look, stop, slow down, start again. It's very dependent. But like I say, at the end of the day, the battle with the stammerer is in their own head. So who am I to preach to somebody listening to a stammerer to say, do this, do that, do the right thing? Every situation is unique. Every person is unique. Will want different things. But like, at the end of the day, just be conscious of, like, the battles in their own head, as it is with any condition, really. And that all a stammerer is looking for, really, in low confidence situations, is a bit of acceptance. Like, it's okay, it's fine, don't worry.
And I think you just hit the nail on the head there. You talked before about somebody has got some sort of medical condition like cancer, for example, and you don't know what to say to them, but you'll naturally say, are you okay? are you okay? Whereby with a stammer, again, we touched on before, neurological condition, somebody won't say, are you okay?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
You've got your family, you've got your friends, but actually, so I'm going to ask you now. So, how are you doing now? Or you seem to be you're a very confident person, and you've really worked very hard on your breathing, and there's very little stammer there that comes across. So, how are you now? Mentally, and how does it impact you at your age now, 24 years old, on a day-to-day basis?
Do I worry about it? Yeah. Will I ever not worry about it? No. I'm always going to be conscious of it because it's going to be with me for the rest of my life. I'm sure about it. As we've touched on a couple of times, stammers do get better as you get older for a number of reasons, whether it's you learn to dodge it. Some people do very luckily just grow out of it. Some people are just able to be more covert. Well, some people just get more confident. And for me, by the day, still, I'm getting more and more confident in who I am myself. And I'm learning to not seek the acceptance of other people and just accept myself instead. You had someone on the podcast, bless her, I can't remember her name, but she was absolutely fantastic. I listened to the person back. She was talking about mindfulness, and I just resonated with that so hard. Like it wasn't that you need to rely on. In her case, it was her ex that she was worried about. Like, you can't be relying on these people at the end of the day, because unfortunately, as much as you love some people, family, friends, acquaintances, romantic interests, whatever, there may be, anyway, a time in your life where they're not there anymore. And eventually, the only thing you have, and you will have forever, is yourself. So you need to learn to accept yourself. And that is the only sort of acceptance that you need to prioritize, I think, above anything else. So that's what I've been doing. And in answer to your question, because I know that I've done very well of rambling and avoiding your questions to some extent. Yes, I'm okay. I'm very good. There's times where it's tough during a sort of coronavirus pandemic. It's sort of tough because you're worried about a lot of things, and anxiety from any direction or source will make a stammer worse, because just raising anxiety, we've talked about breathing, just makes it worse. But there's been other things like in the last couple of years that have took my confidence to new lows, where like all sorts of things. So it's not perfect, and it never will be, but I'm okay with it. I've accepted it, and I'm okay with myself, and I think that's the main thing. And whether that changes for better or for worse as I go forward in my life, we'll see. But right now, I'm really good. Thank you for asking.
No, and so around you graduated from university, you've got your full-time job, and then you went into, let's call it, the media side of it. You've got you work with Bear Pit TV. For those people out there that don't know what it is, it's a Stoke City fans channel, let's just call it that, which is on YouTube. And you've now got your own podcast show, the YYY podcast. Before we go into that, if you went back to a 14-year-old Ben Rowley and said, look, by the time you're 24, you're going to have these two podcasts where my job with a podcast is I talk all the time, what do you think you would have said then?
Not a cat and owl's chance. There was no way I was scared of speaking in any given situation, let alone by putting myself into these situations and putting my voice on the internet for other people to hear. Like, I'm in my life, I'm such a perfectionist, and I will only put stuff out if I'm really happy with it.
Yeah.
And my voice is absolutely not perfect, partially because I've got the Stoke accent. Sorry, everybody. But partially because of the stammer too. And I was so self-conscious about it before that I would feel that was something that people would worry about. So there was no chance, because I thought it was a bad thing. Like I say, it was something I didn't own. I thought it was a threat to who I was. It was a threat to my personality. So no, I would have never done it. But here we are.
Well, the current show that you have, which I was absolute pleasure to be a guest on it last week, is the YYY Files podcast. Again, I'll pull the links at the end. The Twitter's at the YYY Files and www.theyyyfiles.com. What made you set this up?
I bet you can guess reason number one. Yeah, it was beating this. It was an absolute screw you to myself and any doubters. Not that I really have any, but like, it was just, you know what, I can do stuff like this, and not only can I do stuff like this, I want to do stuff like this. I want to be able to prove to myself that I can speak to a public audience and be able to put myself out there and not worry about it. There's not an episode of the podcast that I don't like. Do I edit out stammers? Yeah, of course I do. Yeah. But that's the beauty of podcasting. But I don't care anymore about stammering in front of other people. So the whole sort of basis of the podcast is that every time I go on, I interview a Stoke fan about their journey, experiences, relationships with following Stoke City Football Club. And like I say, that's meeting a new person every time. Now, meeting a new person when I was 14 or such was my worst nightmare, because no one knows what you have. Many people who listen to the podcast probably don't know that I've got a stammer, in all honesty. Because like I say, I edit it out and I don't really talk about it on there. It's not the place to be talking about it. But when I'm meeting these new people, whether that's over the internet, whether that's over the phone, whether that's in person, like they probably pick up within the first 5 minutes that I've got a stammer. And I used to care about that so much and I used to hide it, but actually, like people realize and go, you've got a stammer, nice, and let's just carry on. And like that was the biggest motivation. But then, like these stories about how people became fans and like the little pub talk stories that they have and their opinions about the club. I genuinely believe that every voice deserves to be heard, even mine with a stammer. Like my voice deserves to be heard too, and that goes for any person who wants that platform. I don't feel like that was something that was offered particularly by the club or other outlets. Like for those who are listening and are not sort of Stoke or football fans, like there's a plethora of sort of Stoke City media content, and it's fantastic. There's other podcasts, there's YouTube channels, there's fanzines, there's illustrators. There's so many I can't reel off the top of my head. Radio shows, blog writers, book writers. There's so much out there, as much as any football club in the world, I think. And like being part of that is really, really special, because I feel like I'm adding something new to it. And I'm a creative guy. I said I'm a designer, so I wanted to get involved with something creative that was outside of my work. When, like with any job, it doesn't always present you with the opportunities that you want to be creative or in the exact field that you want to be in. So just something to me, something to fill my time up with, which I'm really grateful for in this period at the moment, when life's cancelled.
So it's a show where actually, it's a bit different to, for example, my podcast. I reach out like to yourself to get you on as guests. This is a show where if any Stoke City fans listen, and we'll put all this on the Stoke platforms anyway, they should come to you and say, yeah, I'd like to share my life story with Stoke City.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, don't get me wrong. I have approached people. There's friends I'm close with that have been on the podcast. People like Elliot Hackney, who started the Bear Pit TV, one of the Stoke City fan networks. I approached him as my first guest, and he was fantastic. Nigel Johnston, for example, BBC Radio Stoke commentator, absolutely fantastic, wonderful bloke.
Yeah.
And I got somebody to approach him on my behalf, and he was fantastic. There's plenty of other people. Yourself, in a way, we sort of like interacted mutually, and we sort of reached out to each other. I guess it was quite strange. Yeah. But yeah, the premise is for the YYY Files, like there's so many Stoke fans out there, and like I say, it's not a case where you don't even need to be particularly interesting. In fact, a lot of the people that come on this show don't think they're interesting. I think they genuinely are, and every story is so different. Like, of course, every life is so different, as we've heard on this podcast, and it goes down to the granite, minute detail on that podcast too. Like, every story is different, and we shouldn't take that for granted. And I just find them so interesting, and so do a few other people. It's a big, long podcast like this one, and I appreciate that it's all about Stoke City, so it's not everybody's cup of tea. But yeah, anyone that wants that platform to leave that timestamp, that memory capsule, yeah, it's there for them at the end of the day. So anyone that wants it can do it, sign up, go for it.
So for yourself, you're a Stoke City fan as well, often down the Bet365 Stadium. I'm going to steal a question off your show, Ben. Why Stoke City?
Oh yeah, that's the opener. Why? Wow. So I tell you what, this is something I've not actually thought about in great detail ever before. But I do know the story, and it might take me a while to recite it. So I was never a football fan at all. As a youth, I was a swimmer. If I'm going off on a small tangent, back in the day, I used to be like a competitive racing swimmer. Swam for the Midlands and stuff like that. Loved it. Massive confidence boost at the time for my stammer. Thought it was another one of these wonderful confidence building exercises. So I wasn't into football. When I was about 12, 13, being the decent child at school that I was, I got some tickets to see a Stoke City game. I didn't think anything of it. I took my dad because didn't know anyone else that was a really hardcore Stoke fan at the time, and we went.
You took your dad?
Yeah. So
right,
it wasn't the fact of my dad took me. It was I took my dad to the football. He was aware of Stoke City. Like, when they got promoted, I think we saw it come through on teletext when they got promoted, and we were like, oh, good for them, and didn't think anything of it. But yeah, I took my dad down to the football.
Okay.
And we both sort of fell in love with it together. I can't speak for him and say what it was for him, but for me, it was a 1-0 loss against Birmingham. Like, it was a really crap game. It wasn't even a nice day, I don't think. It was like December-ish time, November. But the noise, the hairs on the back of my neck, the jeers and boos towards Sebastian Larsson, who was playing for Birmingham at the time, it resonated with me so hard. It was so infectious. Okay. And it was this place where you think about, at the time, this was pre sort of McGuire program, this place where you can shout and scream, and it doesn't matter what you're saying because you're drowned out by 30,000 other voices in the stadium. And it was perfect. It was this place where I could speak and shout without guilt for the first time, and I loved it. And that's why I fell in love with Stoke City. I think I learned more about them. Like, I played FIFA as a kid. Of course, that's what you do. Learn about football in other ways. Watched the World Cup. Went to watch more Stoke games. Obviously, to talk to people in school about football. There's your conversation starter. Like I said, I was very bad at making conversations, and still aren't the best to this day. But I had a new conversation starter at school. I would talk about football to football fans I would never talk to before. And it was perfect, and it just snowballed, and I just had this obsession for it, as a lot of things that I'm interested in. If I'm interested, I'm obsessed. I remember being obsessed with Robot Wars and Jungle Run as a kid on the TV, and swimming I was obsessed with, and certain people I was obsessed with, and Stoke City was one of those things. And it's just snowballed from there. I just got myself so involved. Season tickets, buying every copy of FIFA under the sun, getting involved on social media, these fan platforms that I've been involved with. As I say, starting up my own platform, it's just snowballed. It's got bigger and out of control. The amount of money I've spent on that club, considering that it was a free ticket that they give away at school, they've made their money out of me. Don't you worry about that.
Yeah. And how do you think the season's gonna play? Yeah, how do you think the season will play out, Ben?
I think they're going to carry on with it just because money and just the complications of everything that's going on. Is that the right thing to do? We talked about this slightly on your podcast. on my podcast with you. Sorry.
Yes.
um, yes, I like lives come first, and I think that that's essential. Like you talked about people like N'Golo Kante and Troy Deeney. They have the absolute right to refuse to play if they're worried about them and their family's safety. But at the end of the day, football means so much to so many people that there's going to be a little bit of pressure to bring it back. And the fact that there's so much money and business and corporate input to football that it's so complicated if these things stop. There's going to be every legal battle under the sun if the season doesn't carry out. That I think that the pressure of everything around them means the season will eventually carry on behind closed doors. And then whenever next season happens, probably when it's safe to do so. But I mean, it seems to change all the time.
Well, I agree. It's looking more and more likely by the day that we will get there with the Premier League and Championship. I just don't know how it will. Let's take Stoke, for example, and let's take, say, if Tyrese Campbell tested positive and he has to self-isolate for 7 days and it means we're without our best striker. How does that work?
I mean...
You know... Do you postpone the game or
there have been clubs at the moment that have tested positive for coronavirus. Hull have said that a couple of their, I don't know whether it's staff members or players, but like they've had a couple of positive tests. I imagine the cold, harsh truth of it, if the season does carry on and there are these isolated incidences, I believe that it's going to be like an injury or an illness or a suspension. Unfortunately, we just ruled out the game. It's one of those things, and the team will carry on. If it becomes to the point where a whole club is infected or the whole league is infected, or someone passes away from COVID-19, things will change. There's going to be a tipping point between isolated cases, hard luck. Okay, we've got to stop this now. It's getting out of control. Like, what's the balance between bringing football back because it's the right thing for the fans and the right thing for businesses, and the thing of keeping people alive? And that threshold must be, someone's got to work that out. That's somebody's job at the moment. Someone's got to define what happens to stop the season. And I'm very grateful. It's not my decision to make.
Well, I think you touched on it before. Again, that's why people are in that profession and they get paid a lot of money to make the decision.
Yeah.
But if there's a death of a professional, which hopefully there will not be, I would say in any of the European leagues, they would stop it.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, this is it seems to be such a ruthless illness. We know it has its tendencies to affect certain groups, but we've seen the stories about cases where people haven't had underlying health conditions at a healthy age that, by all accounts, shouldn't have suffered that badly, and they have. It seems to be ruthless. So will that happen at some point? Quite possibly. If we're talking about worldwide, yeah, I reckon it will do. And that might be what it takes, unfortunately, for some people in the big corporate chairs up above to go, oh, okay, we do actually need to stop this. It is actually affecting people. I don't know.
Going back to your podcast, the Why Files, who would be your dream guest on the show?
Oh man, what a question that is, because I don't know. I know the sorts of people I'd love to interview. Anyone that's passionate about Stoke City, like anyone that has any passion for it at all. And often they're the people that aren't a well-known name or haven't done anything particularly publicly interesting, but anyone who's so passionate about talking about Stoke. And I've had a couple of them and they've surprised me and other people so heavily. That's the sort of person I love to interview. If we're trying to talk names, I think it'd be no surprise that I'd love to interview people like players, very important staff members at the club would be great. Any ex-professionals, anyone involved with Stoke City in any capacity that's well known would obviously be fantastic because they've got unique stories themselves. Andy Wilkinson would be a really interesting person to talk to because he is both. Like, I think the line where I draw on my podcast at the moment, the way it is that it's not a fact-based podcast. It's not a thing where we talk about sort of players' experiences, even though we have dabbled. It's a thing for fans, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, Andy Wilkinson is almost the ultimate fan because he was born in Stone, very close to Stoke. Played for Stone Dominoes, been through the academy at Stoke, was a Stoke fan growing up through all those years. Played for Stoke, got them promoted, went through 3 promotions, I think. FA Cup final, European football, seen some of the most remarkable players in the world play in the red and white stripes. To have retired early from a really sad injury, actually, probably prematurely for his career.
Yeah.
But he still loves Stoke. Of course he does. And we talk about on the show all the time, the identity of Stoke, and he epitomizes it. That raw passion would throw yourself against a brick wall or in front of a bullet for Stoke City, and he did that quite metaphorically on a couple of occasions. He'd be great. Of course he would. But that's the thing. Like, anyone that's got any passion about Stoke City, that's exactly what I look for.
Yeah, that's great. And would you say, go back to your Stammer that we were talking about before, that we've got these media platforms that when you did BEP and you do YYY files, and it's a big, but you know what, I can do this. I can do this. You know, I can overcome or control my stammer to be able to do these shows. Looking back now on your life, I say on your life, you're only 24 years old. What is your biggest achievement that you were most proud of?
Oh man,
and that could be actually, that might have nothing to do with your stammer. What would you say your biggest achievement in life's been?
You know what? There's probably more material things that I've achieved in my life. I've got a wonderful family who I still keep in wonderful touch with these days. They're the closest people in my life today. I've got an amazing group of friends. I've graduated from university with a really good recognised degree. I've got a job that I'm financially secure in. I've got a really nice place that I live in for somebody of my age. I've had some really wonderful long-term relationships in my life. I've interviewed a number of fantastic people on my podcast. I've been on Sky Sports talking about football. I've achieved loads and loads of different things in my life, but actually the biggest thing I've achieved, I touched on it earlier, getting over myself.
Yeah.
Because I think that is genuinely the day where your life changes. It's where you wake up and your insecurities are gone.
Yeah.
And I think that's I can't understate how difficult that is. It's not just a stammering thing. It's for anybody. And insecurities develop over time as well. You might not have them when you're born. I did in my case, but some people might develop an insecurity over time. Getting over an insecurity is the biggest thing you can do because it enables so much. Your head is clear. That's the biggest thing, because I look back and I think if I hadn't got over that insecurity, none of those things that I listed that were so material would have happened. None of them, not any single one of them would have happened. So that was the catalyst, sort of getting over myself, learning that stammering is fine and that you need to accept and love yourself before you accept and love other people or rely on that acceptance from other people. Does it need work? Have I completely done 100%? Nah. Has the balance tipped? Yeah, big time.
Yeah. Well, I think that leads really well into one last question. I asked you before, if you go back to the younger self, you tell your younger self, are you doing these podcast shows now? What would you say? If you would go back to your younger self now, say you were 13, 14 years old, where at that age you're very self-conscious, self-aware, you could just go back in time tomorrow, what would you say to a younger Ben about your stammer, about how you've overcome it?
I'd say, you see that person over there that you're trying to impress, they don't actually care about the fact that you stammer. You see that person laughing at you because you've got a stammer. He's not going to have any significance or importance on your life going forward, because you're going to block him out eventually. Him or her, they're not going to be part of your life because you're not going to allow them to be. These new people that you meet, you don't have to be scared of meeting them. In fact, you should embrace meeting them, because you never know what an interaction does for your life. The amount of times I've met somebody and off the back of it, wonderful things have happened. Like, no, I'm trying to think. Dates, interactions through fairs at university and things to get jobs, or meeting people in public so that I can talk about them on a podcast, or like, don't worry about it. That person that you're trying to impress, straight off the back of it, don't let the stammer beat you. Like, own it. Yeah, if I'm trying to sum it up in 2 words, own it.
Ben, that's great, Ben. It's been an absolute pleasure if you're coming on to Behind the Life. Obviously, getting to know you the last couple of weeks, I think you're incredibly brave, strong, open and honest to share your story. And it is a very important story, and the difficulties you had through your childhood all the way up to university with your stammer. The work you're doing now, and you stole my line earlier on, where it's a big middle finger to all of those people who have had a bit of a laugh or a bit of a giggle and found it funny, because actually, you know what, you're going to achieve a hell of a lot more than them. So Ben, it's a pleasure. I know we'll keep in touch, and honestly, the best of luck in everything you do, Ben.
Thank you very much. Likewise, again, I'm really grateful to have this sort of platform, not only for me to be on and be able to talk about what I want to talk about, but actually, one of the reasons why I do what I do with my podcast is being able to hear new stories. Mine's very much on a micro level where I delve into Stoke City. Having a platform like this to be able to listen to so many stories about so many different topics is absolute gold dust for me, and I love it genuinely. So thank you ever so much for having this platform, or developing it and working on it, and I hope you continue with yours as well.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate that. You take care, mate. Thank you.
Nice one. Thanks, mate.
Ben. Thank you. And that was another episode of Behind the Life podcast with myself, Adam Lambert. Please give me a follow on Instagram at Behind the Life Podcast, Facebook Behind the Life Podcast, and if you're listening to this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button below as well as the like button. I'll be back soon for another episode. For now, take care.